Buy or renovate, which is more affordable? When you discover the price to build your renovation plans, you might think surely it's cheaper just to sell this and go and buy something else instead. But when you go and look at real estate prices, you find that they have also risen. In today's episode, I talk to a real estate agent and find out what's happening with property prices in 2024 and moving forward into 2025. I also investigate the impact of flooding on house prices and whether environmental design is being valued by the market in 2024. I talk to highly respected and experienced real estate agent Tim Douglas from Place West Estate Agents in Paddington, Brisbane. In the Renovation Collaborative podcasts, I interview industry experts and find out the latest practical info to help you renovate smarter. My name is Stephanie Skyring. I'm an Australian architect with 20 plus years of experience helping people create better, more environmental homes on any budget. Good morning, Tim, and thank you very much for joining me again on the Renovation Collaborative podcast and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you very much again for the invitation, Stephanie. It's fantastic.
When it comes to real estate prices and construction prices, I always think it's a case of chicken and egg. And it's like, which came first? Which got higher first? You know, people often will go through the process, I know, of designing, and then they look at the price of that and they're like, oh, it must be cheaper to go and buy a new house. So then they go and look over at real estate, and then the price of houses go up as well. Can you tell me what's happening with the price of real estate in Brisbane at the moment? And in your experience, what's driving the current market changes? Because I know we've had some incredible growth in both construction prices and real estate prices over the past few years since COVID. But what's happening at the moment?
Yeah, well, we've had obviously COVID, and look, pre-COVID, the old Olympic story, you know, I was expecting a pretty good growth period for Brisbane over the next 5 to 10 years anyway, regardless of COVID or the Olympics.
Oh, okay.
Securing that. We'd sort of been up and down since the GFC. And I know that seems like a long time ago, but it was pretty traumatic sort of market to be in back then. It was up and then it was down, and based on interest rates and all the rest of it. So we sort of flew back up after the GFC, and very quickly as they dropped interest rates, and I'm sort of going back a bit to get to what we're at today, but then interest rates came down and then went back up again, and our market sort of suffered and actually dropped off again.
This is Brisbane,
This is Brisbane.
Yeah.
And in that market at the time, it then stayed fairly stagnant for a period of time, 2017-18, and then it sort of started to creep and go up slowly at that point. So it had started green shoots prior to COVID, and that's where I was expecting us to go and build, especially the way where interest rates were very low, and that last interest rate drop that we had pre-COVID was just insane. Like the market just went bananas, and that was pre-COVID, and then it sort of just kept on going when COVID hit, and interest rates just came back further, and I'm remembering, but it certainly was a scenario that then when COVID hit, came back quickly, and then suddenly everyone was at home and didn't have anything else to do but go and buy property.
I know, and trying to go out to open houses with masks on and through shutdowns.
We had to let people in for 2 minutes, and then they had to come back out, and they'd say to us, well, we want longer, and we'd say, well, we're sorry, we can't. And there'd be queues down the road.
Oh, really?
Right?
Yeah. Wow.
People getting into open houses. So it was extraordinary time. But the best part about it, we were allowed to go out and have fun.
That's right, you could leave the house.
That's right.
I didn't know about the queues, I was at home.
Yeah, that's right. So, and it was funny because people just sort of thought, let's go and look at some houses, and because we can't do anything else. So, and at the same time, they had a bit of ScoMo money coming into the back pocket as well, and suddenly they were out spending it. Because they certainly couldn't go out and buy coffees.
No, that's right.
All those sort of things. So anyway, they were putting into housing, and the housing market ran pretty strong. But look, I was expecting that market to go not as quickly and accelerated as it did at the time of COVID. And then we got the election. The Olympics. Olympics are a bit of a funny one, right? It depends on how much money that is actually going to be pumped into the state. Into the state, but into the actual city that it's going to be in. I was in Sydney at the time and living in Sydney when...
Oh, the Sydney Olympics were on, yeah.
And there was an extraordinary amount of money put into Sydney at that time. And Sydney did need a massive lift. And they spent the money. It was incredible. And certainly that property market did run very, very hard in that time. And ran after the Olympics too until about 2004, because we had the World Cup as well. From what I was, mind you, I was up here selling property at that time, but it was going.
That's what someone else said to me recently. They said we were talking about where we thought property would go, and they said, well, I expect it to go after the Olympics as well, because people come to the Olympics and go, oh, Brisbane, who knew?
Yeah.
And so then people come and invest in Brisbane.
Yeah, that's right. And Sydney was lucky because it actually had the World Cup rugby for 4 years after. So it sort of had that...
It kept going.
It kept on going. It had that flow-on effect of people seeing the city. Everyone knew Sydney anyway, really. But
but a lot of people haven't actually been there. So it might have been on their bucket list, but they hadn't been there, and that was just what made them go.
That's right. So, but I think Brisbane, it's good for Brisbane because it does obviously put us on the map. There's no doubt about that. But I think the immigration into Queensland since post-COVID has been more probably important for the market than anything else has been as far as growth goes, because we've got to find houses for people to live in, and that's with rentals and all the rest of it. I just want to know where all those people were before, right? Yeah. Suddenly we've got, it doesn't matter Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, suddenly there's more people everywhere, right?
Moving around
So our market here, we're expecting it to still do pretty well over the next, 7-8 years or so up to Olympics. And, it's like all those things, like the last 30 years, I'm expecting it to do the same or better in the next 30 years, effectively, in our Brisbane market.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So I used to sell these little cottages around here for $120,000, $130,000 back then.
Yeah.
And now we're selling those cottages for 1.5.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the market is going to continue to grow and do well. And obviously try to get into the market best you can, realistically, is the thing.
Because it keeps on moving, doesn't it?
Keeps on moving.
Because I know in one of the earlier discussions I talked to a cost estimator, and the growth of construction had been moving so fast, as we talked about, was similar to houses, I think, was it? Because since COVID, it sort of jumped that 40 to 50%. It was extraordinary. And so people were worried that possibly they would have overcapitalised, but I think the real estate market, it came up.
Yeah, it has. And it's those houses actually that are performing very, very well at the moment are the fully renovated homes that have been done over the last 12, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Those homes are performing extremely well because the cost of going and doing those today is
very high.
Is very high.
Yeah.
So a lot of those people are out in the streets. For example, going and doing that, what I talked about before was going and getting plans done, working out what the costs are, and then going, oh my goodness, I can sell it for this much. I'm going to cost this much to do it. Am I better off going and buying something already done?
Mm.
So, and saving myself 12, 18 months period of time while I do that and rent somewhere where I've got to go and move. So a lot of people are going, if you can find me those, that'd be great.
Yes.
But right now the problem with that is that there's a lack of those new builds being done.
Understandably,
because
it's hard and it's expensive.
That's right.
And I think it was the variability of the rate that everything was going up. Builders didn't want to sign contracts because they were, being burnt by prices changing. Like, it's just been such a difficult market. So I understand that there will be definitely a lack of them now.
Yeah. So the real market, that done end product today, I think is performing very well. The one that's performing probably not as well as it has are just probably the unrenovated little cottages.
Oh, okay.
So that's your buy. That's your pick for your day.
That's the inside scoop.
That's
Thank
the
you.
inside today.
Yeah, but then you go, we've got a bargain. And then you go and look at how much it costs to renovate it and go, that's
right.
why we got a bargain.
But for the person that's going to just sit on it for a period of time
Yes.
and then those things settle down and just watch it, those little cottages are very good little investments, little gold gems, I think, of, opportunity there that I think over time will always perform very well, but they're softer at the moment based on the cost of renovation.
Yes, if that's what you're buying it intending to do, it's not as appealing.
That's right. So
wow, interesting. Really
investors
interesting.
aren't really out there at the moment buying as much as they have been. So those little things are quite good little buys, I think, at the moment. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, that's great to know. From your knowledge, can you tell us how Brisbane is comparing to other capital cities at the moment in terms of its growth and where it's going?
Yeah, so obviously we've just had the Brisbane's become second to Sydney in the average house price.
Wow.
It's taken over from Melbourne, which is pretty big. The prices at the moment, the way I see them, I can only see, certainly from my point of view in Brisbane, the Brisbane market to continue growing. And I would expect Sydney too. I still think Sydney's quite cheap.
Oh, okay. So they're still going to keep. And how close are we to Sydney though?
Oh, we're still a fair bit. I haven't got the percentage on me, but we're still a fair bit away. But, like coming up to, it's funny, we actually got closer after the GFC. We actually got quite close to Sydney.
Oh, right.
And I don't know about that average price, but I know that when you could go to inner city, Sydney, we were only you're buying something here for, let's say, 800, a little cottage. You could buy something in Manly or Neutral Bay or whatever for around 1.1, 1.2. Yes, smaller land size in Sydney, but bedroom sizes and those sort of things pretty similar. You're on you're 400 here, but might have been 250 to 3 down there. But we did actually get quite close back then. But that has totally drifted out over the last few years, obviously. So, but I still think Sydney went through a period of time there. They had taxes, selling properties, and all the rest of it, where that market just sat there for quite some time. We're being the mining cities of Perth and Perth and Brisbane. After the GFC, we actually still kept on going quite hard as far as prices realistically, where those other cities, Melbourne and Sydney, actually sat. Well, actually, Sydney sat for quite some time and didn't move. So over the last sort of 10 years, I think 8 years, 7 years, thereabouts, Sydney's actually been playing catch up a little bit.
Okay. And so you said we'd overtaken Melbourne. And is that because Melbourne took a bit of a hit after COVID and it's just, is it us moving up or it moving back?
It's probably them moving back a little bit, but they've still got big immigration into the state as well. Maybe it's we've had a massive increase. I think it could be a little bit of and I think house prices cover off the units, but we've had a massive increase in unit prices over the last 18 months, 2 years. Like it hasn't moved for a long, long time, and it's the best I've seen the unit market in 30 years in inner city Brisbane.
Yeah, okay. Because that's a funny one, isn't it, unit prices? Because it depends what's coming online. They sort of stay really stable and they're not a great investment, and then suddenly they'll move. That's
right, and that's really what we've had in the last period of time, where interest rates have gone up, and people aren't buying the little cottages where they can only find a 40 unit, so their actual their opportunity to buy a little home
I see.
isn't there as much.
Yes.
Right, so they've had to go to buy units.
Mm.
So that's why that little house market sort of softened. So when those interest rates come back again, the flip will go back towards homes, right? And not as much the unit. The unit market will soften a little bit. That little cottage market will jump up a little bit. So that's where that sort of changes. And it happened like that in around that sort of 15 to 17 as well, when interest rates popped up again. Right? Yes. I think it was around those.
It was. That was, yeah. And I know, because I don't know the real estate market so much, but I know construction and, because you talked about it softening a bit in 2017, and I know the construction market did as well then.
Yeah. It came off a bit after that because it ran the construction market and steel and everything, ran very hard into COVID. Into GFC. So
yes, it did.
It ran really hard and jumped. And then it did come off about 20% off its highs back then, right? So we're going to have that same sort of pullback probably at some point. Where that sits, is it 5, is it 10, is it 20? We might have that little bit of change in the market, but I think a little bit to do with that is, and we're sorting those sort of things out, as delivery of product worldwide. So delivery of product while people are having wars and those sort of things don't help. And then getting ships back moving around the world, and after COVID, I think that's taken time as well to re-employ people and all those sort of things too. So they're just not isolated. These things are never just isolated problems.
No, they're so not. No, there's so many things that affect each other.
That's right, yeah.
So we've talked about those big capital cities on the eastern seaboard there. Are there any other capital cities that you could provide any advice on about what's happening with the market in those areas?
Yeah, we'll say let's say Perth. So Perth's has sat stagnant for a long time, and is starting now as the mining builds up again, and they're re-employing and all the rest. Perth is now starting to get some good growth, and it has over the last sort of 18 months or so. So we're starting, and I think Perth's a very good market to be buying into, and see some good growth over the next sort of 10 years, because it has sat stagnant for a long, long time. Hobart or Tasmania, Hobart probably. Launceston I don't know as much, but certainly Hobart, I've had a lot of clients that I've sold for here that have moved to Hobart.
I certainly know quite a number of people who've moved to Tasmania as well.
Yeah, so that seems to be a market that continually is moving, and now they got the AFL down there.
Yes.
We can all move there, but that's certainly that market. I think I was in Hobart only a couple of weeks ago, and I hadn't been there for 30 years, and it's stunning.
Yeah, it is.
And refreshed myself with Hobart, and it's just beautiful.
It is an absolutely beautiful place. Yeah.
So I think that trend will continue down there for people to move to, and COVID gave it that another boost again. I think Adelaide, I think that's certainly something that is a beautiful city and will always perform well too in its time, and that depends on obviously factors in that market of growth and population growth and things like that. But that seems to be always a market that does work pretty well for people down there too. Knowing people down there, it seems to and a few agents, it always moves pretty well. So Northern Territory, I don't have much understanding of that, so I can't sort of help you there in that sense. But certainly Hobart and Perth are two markets that are pretty strong and will continue that way, I think. And certainly Perth, I think, because it's sat for some time.
So my next question's about environment and climate change and those sorts of things. So starting with the basics, do you find that buyers appreciate the value of that climate responsive design brings? So when I say that, I mean living areas to the north, living areas flowing out to the north, that sort of stuff. breezes, natural light, all that sort of stuff. Is that when you've got buyers looking at a house, are they things they're looking for consciously or unconsciously, or what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think they are looking for those environmental type northern aspects and those if they can, find them, and light and all those sort of things you talk about.
Yeah.
And if you can find a block that's got your living space to that north, and especially in Queensland, that northeast aspect where the prevailing breeze is in summer.
Yes.
It's a joy to be.
It is.
Sitting
It's
in a home.
transformational. Yeah.
And you can get that cross, or that breeze flowing through your home, is really important.
Do they add much value, or
I think so.
you think they do? Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it.
A house designed well for that orientation will add some value.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for warmth in winter and the coolness in summer, I think it's important.
But in terms of property value, does it add much?
I think so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you've got a north-facing aspect to the rear of a home where people can live and you've got that, I think it's worth more than, something facing dead west into the...
Yeah, similar size, dead west.
That's right.
Oh, interesting. And I think it should, because they're vastly different houses. Like, I know the value of it as an architect, but I just wondered, was the market aware of that importance?
Yeah.
So other features that are coming through a little bit more at the moment, have seen them coming across my books, maybe passive house, double glazing, green roofs, solar panels, three-phase power and things for car charging. Are people asking about these features? Are you seeing any interest or value add from these sorts of features, or is it not really on people's radar?
No, they are. I think certainly solar panels, the car charging, all of those sort of things are important. If you're just a builder doing one for a spec, do you put the solar panels on the home at that time? I think one of the issues are it's such a changing market.
Yes.
There's better quality product. You could start one today and you finished in 16 months' time or 12 months' time or something. You could have a better battery system, and the technology is changing so quickly. So I sort of go, if you're going to build it for your home, put it on. Right? If you're going to do it as an investor type salon, maybe it is better off for that. And you could put it on for them, but they could when they're buying the property, advise you in the sense of what
system they want.
System they
want.
Yeah,
I know. It's fraught, that whole market.
It is.
Yeah.
So because they might want something that's a bit, giving more bang for your buck in a sense of what the developer might put in, right? And they might want batteries where everything's going to be added to batteries, but I think you got to tread a little bit carefully on those sort of things, I think.
Okay. So in Brisbane, particularly, flooding is becoming more prevalent due to all the changes in the weather. And based on your experience, what impact do sites that have potential flooding, how does that affect property value? And I know that's a really big question, and that's a really big sliding scale, because you can have potentially a great site on the river or a great site, say, in Rosalie, which is close to everything, that might get a bit of flooding, and there's a bit of flooding and then there's a lot of flooding. But how are buyers generally feeling about houses that have some level of flooding?
Yeah, look, obviously, when I first started selling, people used to ask me about the 74 floods. Well, there wasn't any flood maps, and I'd sort of go, well, it flooded and sort of got up here, and you didn't really understand where it got. And then since the 2011 floods, then the council and government turned around and put the flood maps in, and then suddenly all these people have got flood maps all over their homes.
I know, and new level 5s all over everything.
And it's been difficult for the homeowners that have had that put over them. And I think it's one of those things that, yes, prices have come back. But then again, it's funny, 2011, we didn't get a flood for a long time until recently. And people started to forget about the floods a bit. And those prices had increased a lot from the bottom base of where they went down to. For example, a house that pre-11, let's go through this, a house pre-11 that hadn't been flooded since 74, that we just sold around Torwood Way, that sort of thing, they paid, pre the flood was about 670.
Yeah.
Back then. Then it fell down the floods to about 360 to 400.
And in what time frame was that after? This is
straight
2000.
after.
Straight
after the floods.
Yeah, because they were like, everyone's like, I've got to get out. I never want to deal with this again.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So it was a dramatic drop off in house prices. But then the run up that it had from its bottom to pre the last, they were back up to and surpassing. They were sort of 800-900.
Wow.
Yeah. Right.
Is that just people forgetting? And they were different sorts of floods as well. Like it all got a little bit technical when it comes to flooding.
Yeah. So the last flood was no mud.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we had the shut-off valves in Rosalie, so it was more silt.
Yes.
And it didn't go as high, obviously. But that's where they had got to as far as that goes, as far as pricing. And then they came off a bit and they're sort of sitting at around, 700, that sort of thing. Mind you, I just sold one that had flooded, and that was just a smaller 405, but I just sold one that we just sold for 1.25, right? And that had flooding downstairs, didn't get into upstairs, just sold another one for 1.55, right, down the bottom of Fernberg Road, that had flood underneath it, didn't have flood inside.
Yes, so they're in the flooding zone. They'll be impacted by everything that happens with flooding, like the shutdown of power and everything that happens around flooding, but it's not not catastrophic.
So then one of the things the council have done around here, government and council have basically bought houses back. I
know, I've been watching that. Yeah, so, there's a buyback. There's a bit of a program going on there. Yeah,
so I find it, and they've paid good money for those homes. Like 1.7, 1.8.
Wow.
2 million, 2.5.
Wow.
So I have a little bit of an issue with that, personally, is that we're in a housing crisis and we're actually taking houses off the land.
Oh, I see.
Right, so there is a bit of a scenario where I go, I don't understand where you're taking houses away when we need housing, right? So why wouldn't you buy those homes from people? Because a lot of those homes weren't flooded internally as well, right? And we could rent them to, use them as housing, housing support or whatever it might well be for people. So anyway, don't get me started.
I know, that's a really interesting strategy.
Yeah, so now that's just grass.
Yeah, I know, and there's the ones connected to Free Park and things like that.
Free Park. Yeah. So I get a bit sort of, I don't understand it. We pay, so then you can give it to those people. What about the other people if that's, in other suburbs and whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, how much of this going on where we could still keep those homes and actually use those homes for accommodation?
And I think it's as you say, nothing is ever straightforward. I know that it's all caught up with insurance and there's all sorts of other things as well.
It's a hell of a lot easier to subsidise those people who own those homes, their insurance over the next 15 to 20 years than it is buy back their home.
Yes, right? yes. I did look at that and
so
was very surprised.
Why wouldn't you subsidise their insurance? If the insurance policies are up a little bit higher, why don't we just subsidise them, I suppose? So that was something that I sort of went, well, it's easier to do that than go and pay huge amounts of money for the properties. And also, once again, we're getting rid of lower house prices. Like we're actually we're taking away the opportunity to people to actually buy a cheaper home in this area. Right? So suddenly we're losing a lot of homes that actually are affordable.
Yeah.
So affordable housing becomes an issue. So not only that, even if it's affordable housing. And people might go, if it's every 10 or 15 years that I get a little bit of water under the house or whatever it might be, hey, that's all right, but I'm in the area I want to be and I can afford to be here. So I think I think it's not a great thing what we're doing with the housing that has been flooded.
Yeah, it's such a tricky thing. I mean, I was alluding to that in one of my other questions about smaller houses on bigger blocks, or just different ways to get some diversity of people who can afford different things in a suburb. Yeah, you're right.
That's right. And maybe we could build some, maybe we could actually build some stuff on this land that's it's all raised up, and we could make it that way that it's more, build it around the flood a little bit more than we have.
Yes.
Right? But still use the land.
Sometimes I've got renovation clients and they say they're planning to sell in 5 years, and I always advise that they'll have to be really careful and keep costs under control. What advice would you give them at the moment in terms of that, if they were planning to renovate? So they still are renovating for their family, because they've got changing family needs, but they're thinking, oh, look, we're not, this is not our dream house. We're not here for the long term. We'll be out 5 to 10 years. So then what would you suggest?
Well, I think you still got to go. If you're going to, is this a bigger renovation we're talking about?
Probably, yeah.
So I think you still got to go all the way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? 5 years is a long time, effectively, and you got to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. It shouldn't date in that period of time. So I think you're better off spending that little bit more to get it right, and getting it looking beautiful than not quite spending the right money in the right places.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because as soon as it's, the money you spend today is worth more tomorrow, effectively, to get it, and whatever. It's going to feel like if you'd renovated something 5 years ago, let's say, you'd be, and I can tell you 5 to 10 years ago, I can tell you still the cost was a lot.
I know, it's always a lot.
It's always a lot.
I've always thought that it was always a lot.
Always a lot.
Even when it was like a quarter of the price, I'm like, that was so much.
I know.
Back at the time.
So you got to think about that and go, okay, remember when I got that price back then, it was actually like $1 million.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a lot. Yeah. And then that was only 5 to 7 years, and now it's 2 million.
Yes.
You know what? In 5 to 7 years, you'll be going, you know what, that 2 million, lucky I spent it then.
Yes.
Because that's 3 million today. Right? So I think those choices that you make at the time are normally the right choices you're making financially, if it gets you the end result of what you want. Right? And the lifestyle that you're wanting out of it, I think. Because that money tomorrow is going to be worth more.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you so much, Tim, for coming to talk to me today. That was very, very valuable and really insightful. I really appreciate your time.
It's been wonderful, Steffi. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward, hopefully, to doing another one.
Fantastic. These are the key points from this episode. Wow, another fantastic interview with Tim Douglas. I just want to draw your attention to 3 main points from today. Firstly, the property market is showing growth in most Australian capital cities, with Brisbane looking particularly strong going into the Olympics. Brisbane has had a very strong run since COVID, and there's no sign of that stopping over the next 7 to 8 years. Secondly, the high price of construction over the past few years has led to a shortage of completed larger renovations and new houses in the Brisbane market. Therefore, these products are now in high demand. On the flip side, unrenovated, smaller cottages are not performing as well as they used to. This is obviously because there's not as much enthusiasm for renovating as there used to be, making these products less desirable. Tim advised that if you're able to hold on to one of these properties and just wait, they'll become a better investment over the longer term. The third point was that environmental design adds value. I've always known it does, but it's really great to see that reflected in the market. Getting the climate responsive design basics right is always a winner. Get those living areas facing north, the indoor-outdoor living areas, so they'll be filled with light and responding to the climate, responding to the seasons, winter through summer. Next week, I move on to the next step in the renovate or sell journey, obtaining finance. Over the next 2 episodes, you'll find out about the very valuable information that a mortgage broker can provide. I'll be talking to highly respected mortgage broker Richard Jeffries from Newbridge Home Loans in Brisbane. Looking for more information on design, construction, costs, or environment? You can find everything you need on the Renovation Collaborative website. Listen to the full podcast or get the transcript PDF edited into clear Q&A. If you're short on time, sign up for the weekly wrap newsletter and get the concise podcast summary delivered straight to your inbox. You'll also find 11 easy-to-read courses demystifying the entire home design and construction process.